I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
I did it on the music again this time. Yay! Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the 24 hours. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Welcome back to the 24 Hours of Hell and Back after show. Tonight, Gordon Ramsay is here in California, in Southern California, Ventura County, Oak Park, which I'm assuming is up in Ventura County. I've been up there a couple of times. It's not too far from here. I want to say it's like an hour and a half, maybe 2-hour drive, something along those lines. It's not far from Los Angeles. He went to a restaurant called The Park. This was a fun episode. Before we jump into that, I'm Zia Anderson. I am alone today, all on my lonesome. Saba and Mike left me to go eat delicious food without me. Actually, I don't know if that's what they're doing, but I hope it's what they're doing. I hope they're eating some delicious food tonight. So it's going to be me alone. I'm going to give you my thoughts on this episode. I thought that this was a really good episode. I actually liked it. I thought that overall, the kitchen was a bit of a disaster, but it wasn't as bad as some kitchens I've seen before. The front of house was not too bad. I think the real problem was inexperienced owners and an absent owner that didn't really know how to run a restaurant, what the heck he was doing. He wasn't super invested, and it was tearing a marriage apart. There's kind of a twist at the end, and by twist, I just mean I wasn't expecting it. It was like boom, boom, boom of like bad things, but the owner still sort of reported it. You know how they do that 3 months later thing? So that was really interesting. But before I get there, this one was fun because we got Gronk. I kept seeing in the beginning of the credits, you know how they show you a bunch of flashes of points throughout the season. That was happening, and they kept showing a flash of Gronk. So I knew he was coming at some point, or I thought he was coming at some point. This is the episode. This is Gronk. I'm not a huge Patriots fan. I'm so sorry, Maria. I'm so sorry. My husband is from New York, so I have to be a Giants fan. It's just how it goes. Hawaii doesn't have a team. I don't have a football team. That being said, Gronk is just a fun guy. He's one of those guys that he was a great player. I think he's retired now. But he's a good personality. He like hosts things and does all these other things. He's just a big like fun party dude. He seems like a really happy-go-lucky guy. So he was fun in this episode because he went in as a distraction because Gordon Ramsay, you know, as he said before, it's getting harder and harder for him to get in there and actually like slide under the radar because he's so recognizable. And I've said that before. I have always hoped that if Gordon Ramsay came into a restaurant that I was working at in disguise, I would still know it was him. I would hope, because it still seems fairly obvious. But this time it seemed like everybody was so interested in Gronk. Everybody was going to take pictures and everything. I think it worked. I think that was a distraction that worked really well because Ramsay was able to go in with, I think it was a fire department. And the sad thing about, it was actually really sad about this family so it's Kirin and Angelika. And they're a married couple, a husband and wife, like owner of this restaurant. And they lost their house in the fire up there. There was all these fires and they lost one of their houses, and that's just, it's always really, really sad when you hear stuff like that because you hope that they have really good insurance and hope that they can rebuild, but they still lose everything that they have. And they had this restaurant, and it seemed like Angelika was the one mostly running it. Kirin is his name. He also hosts a TV show, I guess. So he travels a lot to record and do that. So he's gone a lot of the time, and it leaves Angelika in charge of the restaurant. And it seems like they were constantly fighting, which again is also really sad to see because they couldn't really keep it together. Angelika doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't want to run a restaurant. Like, that's not what she wants to do. So unfortunately, you know, she's having a really rough time with that. And also, because of how much they've been struggling and how much business had gone down, they had to fire their chef and they had to fire their manager. I don't know how you can have a successful restaurant that runs without a chef and a manager. There's no head chef. There was an 18-year-old boy named Keven in the kitchen, and he was super young and super, like, granted, he had passion and he wanted to, like, really make something of it, but he wasn't he didn't have a lot of experience. He's like fresh out of high school. 18 is literally fresh out of high school, this poor kid. And then there was, I'm trying to find the name of the other guy, Mark. Mark, who to him, it was just a job. His, food wasn't his passion. He was just there to make money and get a paycheck. And like, I get it, but it's, that's not someone that can really thrive in the kitchen or really lead a kitchen. So they didn't have those two aspects. There was one poor girl named Katie, who I think was a server, but like an unofficial manager and like ran everything day to day. So when anytime anyone had a problem, they went to her, but she's not getting paid for it, which also I just think is so gross. I hate when companies sort of take advantage of people that way. It's not cool. So that was a real bummer just in that sense. And then when it comes to the food, obviously, because there's so much inexperience in the kitchen and people that aren't super passionate about it, the food wasn't good. So, of course, there was oily, greasy calamari, a slow kitchen, gray meatballs, blackened, like overcooked black tomahawk steak that they were apparently charging $80 for? Who the heck? $80 for a tomahawk steak that's like overcooked. That's really bad. So it's kind of understandable that they weren't doing well. So when Ramsay finally takes off his disguise, he got a huge reaction out of this one. I think because everybody was so like smitten with Gronk and everybody was taking pictures with him and it was so exciting that when Ramsay came out, they were like, oh my God. And it was like he got a really big reaction on this time around, which is funny because everybody always has a reaction. But this one just seemed like there were so many more gasps, like women clutching their pearls. Seemed like that sort of thing. It was really funny. And poor Katie, starts immediately crying. It seemed like she said it was because she was embarrassed because she's not a real manager. She doesn't have actual power over what happens there. She's just trying. She's just trying to run a restaurant. It's a restaurant that's run by a staff with no leadership. So when Kirin is out, nobody has anyone to go to. And poor Angelika doesn't know what the heck she's doing. She just was thrown into this restaurant and she's like, I don't want to do this. How do I do this? Like, you can't blame her for being inexperienced and for not running it well. It's not her thing. And when Kirin came back, it seemed like he just wanted to hang out and like hand out free shots and free drinks to people. And it was just like, oh, whatever thing. And he was talking to somebody. This is what struck me as so weird. He's sitting there having a conversation with what I thought was a patron, unless I read that situation wrong. What I thought was a patron, and is like, yeah, you want to have a drink? Let's get a drink. And the patron goes, yeah, I don't have my wallet. What are you doing in a restaurant? Were you eating? Were you just sitting there with no money? Like, I don't understand. How do you not have your wallet, but you're in a place of business like a restaurant? I was so confused by that. Unless I read that situation wrong and it's a completely different thing, I don't even know. So apparently not doing so good. Kind of can't blame poor Angelika. And so they're in a situation now where Ramsay has to come in. And this was an interesting one because the front of house was actually not bad. It looked pretty nice. I didn't think it was terrible. It wasn't like amazing, but it wasn't, the front of house at least wasn't disgusting. And it was a nice, I guess, sort of shell to work with. Like, they had good bones to work with. I don't think that the design team had to do as much as some other restaurants that we've seen on this show. The back of house, on the other hand, was pretty gross. It really was. Like, they had improper food storage and expired products. They had Brussels sprouts and like half-cooked wings, which was super weird. You're like, how does that even, you just throw a handful of Brussels sprouts in there? They weren't like bagged or anything. Like, I don't even know how that would happen. And it was pretty dirty, but again, not quite as bad as ones I've seen before. It definitely needed a deep cleaning, and someone needed to teach these people proper food storage. I don't get that either. Nothing is ever dated. Nothing is ever like covered properly. Nothing is ever stored properly. You can't have vegetables in with raw meat. It's just, I don't know. That just seems like common sense to me. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Does it seem like common sense to you guys? Let me know in the comments because this just seems crazy. But yeah, so they get into the kitchen. The kitchen's a bit of a disaster. And they realize, Ramsay cleans out the kitchen. He tries to talk to Kirin. He tries to talk to Angelika, and he's realizing that things aren't good in their marriage, and it's the restaurant that's bringing their marriage down. And that happens when you get into really stressful situations like that. They really test your marriage. And it seemed like they just weren't on the same page with that at all. And that was really, very sad to see. And they finally got the chefs over, to work with Mary and the rest of the team on his epicenter. I love how Ramsay's like, this is my epicenter. You're like, yes. And quickly realized that while Keven has, big passions and he wants to learn and he's really passionate about food, he wants to be a chef and open his own restaurant, he said. It becomes very apparent that there's no real leader in the kitchen. Again, Mark is just there for a job. He doesn't seem very passionate about food. He's just, getting a paycheck and going in and doing what he has to do. So there's no leader in the kitchen. There's those two guys. I don't know how a successful kitchen is going to run that way. So Ramsay has this idea, and I love when he does these cooking competition things because it's really fun. So he brings in two chefs, and Gronk is going to judge the burgers. They're going to each make a burger. Gronk is going to judge the burgers, and whoever has the best burger wins. It's so fun when he does that. And if they win, they get hired to be the chef there because obviously they need a head chef. You can't run a restaurant without it with two cooks in the kitchen. And also, I know there had to be other cooks scheduled at other times because you can't just have two people in the kitchen at all times. But I wonder if there was anyone else that might have been like proficient or somebody else that might have been able to sort of take on that role. They just weren't there that day. But anyway, he calls in these two guys, and I apologize, I can't remember the other guy's name, but Ozzy was the guy that won. Gronk liked his burger the best, so it was officially crowned the Gronk burger, which I kind of love. I want to go somewhere and order a Gronk burger. Excuse me. Thank you. I got so passionate about the Gronk burger. I was like, I need some water. I want to go somewhere and order a Gronk burger. But anyway, so he wins that competition. He's going to be the head chef that night. And they do this makeover. There's, the before and after. And like I said, the before wasn't too bad. The after, obviously, the kitchen needed to be clean. They did that. I have to say, the before was nice. The after was really nice. It seemed like they made just small changes to really, they got rid of the oyster bar and instead put a stage there for live music, which makes sense for sort of the gastropub theme that they were trying to go for. They added more color. They added some nice greens and some gold and things like that really liven the place up. It was nice before, way nicer after. So, excuse me, goodness gracious. I really appreciate what they did to sort of elevate the restaurant. That was really nice. I thought that obviously the kitchen needed to be clean, and that was really good. When it came to dinner service, Ozzy was doing a good job. I think he was definitely an experienced chef, obviously. Keven was having a little bit of a rough time, but that's because it's stressful, and I don't know that he's ever worked in a really busy restaurant like that. It was full, and it was a big restaurant. I saw the floor, and that kind of stuff does matter to the kitchen. When you have a whole bunch of tickets going into a kitchen at once, this used to drive me crazy about the restaurant I used to work at. When they would just seat a bunch of tables at once when you're on a wait. I understand you want to get off the wait and you want to just get people into the table and seats into the table, but when you're seating 4 or 5 tables in each section, that's 30 tables that are all going into the kitchen at once, and then they wonder why food's taking a long time. That's why. You have to, I just don't understand why you don't realize you have to stagger in, and then guests get mad and they don't understand why, and it's not their fault, but it's the kitchen has 50 tickets that just went in just now, and they have to get to those tickets. So I don't know if he'd ever been really put in that situation before. So you could definitely tell that he was having a bit of a rough time. He was having a rough time communicating, and he was sending out things like the first burger that went out was raw and it had to go back. But eventually the kitchen pulled it together, and it seemed like a pretty smooth dinner service. So all in all, they did a good job, I think, at the end of the day. What comes after that was a real bummer. So initially, Kirin and Angelika had a talk. Ramsay sat down with Kirin and had a talk with him, and Kirin broke down, which was nice to see that he had some feelings left, because it seemed like he didn't care that much what he was doing to his wife and his family and in how the restaurant was failing. It seemed like he was very whatever about it. But he did break down, he did start crying, and it seemed like he wanted his marriage to work. I'm going to be honest with you, though. When he was talking to his wife, Angelika, and he said, look, I don't want you to have to be here running this anymore because this is not your thing. when he was talking to her about that, I wasn't getting a lot of feeling from her. It seemed like she should have been more relieved and happier that he wanted to work on the marriage and them personally, because it seemed like they were not doing well. But she didn't. She didn't seem super relieved. She didn't seem excited. She just seemed very apprehensive. And that, I think, is a really bad sign. And for what comes next, it was a really bad sign. So it seemed like, oh, yay, the kitchen did a great job. You know, they finally got it together. The place was really bustling. The makeover was great. The kitchen was clean. They had a new head chef. I think that they didn't talk about this, but they definitely should have made Katie an actual manager and just given her like the tools and the power to run the restaurant properly. But I don't remember if they ever discussed that. But Kirin did talk about getting a manager so that Angelika could step down and just be at home and raise their kids. Well, fast forward to 3 months later. I have a feeling this restaurant has to be closing down, or he has to be selling it. Unless he figured something else and pulled something else out of his butt. Like, I don't know what he did or what he plans on doing. I mean, obviously, this is from the outside. I have no idea the intricacies. Angelika and Kirin have separated. They are not together. And I gotta be honest with you. I could tell she didn't seem to believe him, and she didn't seem to be in on it at all. So they separated. Kirin, it's interesting because he's like, hey, Ramsay, you know how they do hey, Ramsay, this is what's happening now, blah, 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 blah. Some restaurants won't do this. And I'm actually surprised that they did this with how badly everything seemed to be at the end. But they did it. He did it. And he said, unfortunately, Ozzy didn't show up. We would have gladly hired him as a chef, but he didn't show up after like the 2 days or whatever it was. He didn't come in. So, we lost him, and then we're separated. And then Keven, the young kid, quit. And it goes to Ozzy, and he's like, hey, Ramsay, it turns out that, I kept trying to call, and Kirin wasn't returning my calls, so I guess he didn't want me. And so you find, like, I definitely think that Kirin was lying. I think that he just didn't want to do that. And then Keven said, hey, Ramsay, I quit because Kirin didn't hire Ozzy. He didn't hire Ozzy, and he threw out all the food that you'd put there. So it seemed like while he pretended like he was grateful for the changes and happy with the changes, he was not. And so he got rid of everything. I'm assuming he probably changed the menu back. I could be wrong. But a lot of people get really attached to their menus. I've seen that a lot in this show. It's like, no, this is my menu. And Ramsay will come in and change the menu. And a lot of times they revert back. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if that's what happened. I don't know what they're going to do from here. I mean, I know losing Keven isn't like, you could replace him. And I guess you could replace the head chef if you find one. But it seems like they can't afford it. I don't know what they did in the manager situation. But it seems like they're separated too. I don't know if there's a chance for reconciliation. Obviously, that's just what we got from, a couple of minutes at the end of the episode. I don't know if this was a successful one. I want to say, hopefully, best case scenario for poor Angelika, they can sell the restaurant for a profit, maybe, and she can take her half and start over and do something that she's always wanted to do. But other than that, I don't know what's left for them, but it was actually really kind of a sad ending. It was definitely a twist that I wasn't 100% expecting, that everything just went boom at the end. So that was this episode of 24 Hours to Hell and Back. I hope that the next one is better just for the restaurant in general, because it's always really sad to see restaurants fail. I mean, you really do hope for the best, and I was hoping for Angelika's sake that they would get it together. But I hope she's happier now. I hope things work out for them in their personal lives and she goes on to do better things. So until next time, next episode is going to be really fun. Hopefully this is going to be a good one. I think it's also here in California. Until next time, if you want to keep up with me and my obsession with Gordon Ramsay and all things, dramatic on that front, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Zia_land. That is XIA_land. Also, go check out my Twitch channel. I do a thing where I eat food. And I try things I've never tried, and I talk about it. It's really fun. Twitch.tv/Zialand. I love me some food. And until next time, clean your kitchens.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.